My name is John Lobell. I teach architecture at Pratt Institute. This is a lecture for my course on Frank Lloyd Wright, covering Johnson Wax, Taliesin West, and other projects from the 1930s. Lecture was given in spring 2014. So we're going to look at a bunch of buildings today, and maybe we'll pick up again next week, going a little more depth into what they mean. But now let's just sort of move through a bunch. We'll start with Johnson Wax. So it's now the S.C. Johnson Corporation, a family company when you hear their commercials. But they started with floor wax, so it was Johnson Wax. And they're in Racine, Wisconsin, nearby Taliesin, so Wright had contacts there. And when they wanted new corporate headquarters, he got the job. So for now, the first part is, let's just look here. This is the first part of the building. This gets added later, so we'll look at that in a few minutes and again later in the course. Now, as you mentioned, it turns its back on the gritty neighborhood, which is now, much nicer. And so there are no real windows. You don't see out. There are bands of light coming here, but they're high up and illuminate the space, but without you being able to see out. And then there's a series of skylights here that also aren't going to let you see out. Same thing he did in Larkin Building, where light gets in, but you don't see out. Major space, minor space, entrance in between. Balcony running around, skylight in the middle, tubes with mechanical running through it. So there's a theme that we've seen before. He has these mushroom columns that we'll look at in a minute, and they give you this kind of star. When you put the circles together, the leftover space of these sort of star shapes, and that becomes the skylights. How many people looked at the videos? Great, so you know as much about this as I do. So here's our original part of the building, major space, minor space, entrance in between. A balcony runs around here, we'll see that in a minute, and then this is elevator and then stair around, and mechanical. Custom brick, very handsome, very high density, beautiful brick. And for where the glass is, there's Pyrex tubing. So there are these tubes parallel to each other with neoprene in between, and they allow the light to come through but break up what you would see. And then he has these mushroom columns, which he uses throughout the building, but most importantly to define the main office workspace. Of course, this corporation still keeps the space, but it's like a bazillion times bigger than it was then, and they have many other offices. Besides this one, they're not going to run a whole global corporation today from this space, although they could in the 30s. So here's the balcony running around, and here's this band of light. And then there's no windows here, but there's enough light coming in here and through here that the space is well illuminated. So here's this famous mushroom column, and it was perhaps inspired organically, by a lily pond leaf, lily plant. So here's the column. It's hollow to here, so it's very thin, lightweight. It has a hinge joint down here, comes out to a metal hinge joint. And then up here, if you can imagine this, this looks thick, but it's actually it's very thin and has these ribs running around. So this is a section through circular ribs that run around. So even this is not solid concrete, it's hollowed out, very lightweight. And as you saw in the video, the local building inspector was skeptical about this standing up, and it did very well in their load test. Now there are several versions of these. Here you see the fins of the sections of these ribs. Here you see them running around. And then there's wire mesh providing the reinforcing in here. And if you think of a loofah, which is this thing you use in the shower, like a sponge for bathing, and it's got this sort of web of fibers. It's inspired by, and it's hollow and has a web of fibers. That's the inspiration here. So that web of fibers is the steel reinforcing inside the concrete here. The entrance is hyper modern, really beautiful, and has these revolving doors, very large pieces of glass, very minimal trim. We're not going to see that in New York office buildings until the 1950s. We come in and there's a reception desk, and we go under, well, let's see, we come in here. We go under a balcony, the space explodes into this very high space. We then go to the reception desk, we then go beyond the reception desk and into the space coming up again. And you experience that in the Guggenheim. The entrance of the Guggenheim is very low, and then you experience the space going up. So the lowness exaggerates the impact of the higher space. Here he is using these columns in the parking area where we come in. Again, that's not adequate parking for today. In the 30s, it was just for the boss. And then here's our main workspace. We'll look at Wright's furniture in a minute. And he described it as though you're working at the bottom of a lily pond. So you look up and there the lily is opening up and provides a very peaceful experience. Another view of that main workspace, which again was the main workspace when it was built, and today they have many offices. Really impressive brick here. Now, he does something Louis Kahn would never do. This is the parapet for the walkway up here. So if we go back, there's a walkway here. I don't know if we can see anybody on there, but anyway, there's a walkway, balcony walkway here. And here's the parapet. But you would think if this were the floor, and you're standing on this walkway, it would come up to here. But it doesn't. It comes up to here. Because this is parapet for the walkway. This is underneath the walkway is the ductwork for the mechanical, for the air. And here's a vent for the air. So this is hiding an air duct. This is parapet for the walkway. Wright makes them look both exactly the same. You don't know that. Louis Kahn would never do that. He would let you know which is which. At Salk, he puts a slit here, all the way down to the floor, which ends here. And so you know that much of it is parapet, and then below that is the wall for the mechanical. It has a similar situation, but he lets you know what's going on. Wright doesn't worry about it. Here we are in a walkway from one part of the building to another, and here's more of this Pyrex tubing. And here's Pyrex tubing making a dome at the Secretary's Station in front of the President's office. Here's the tubing being made, so we've got metal mullions in effect. Then we have these neoprene covered stoppers with Pyrex tube. Pyrex is glass that won't break and can handle heat. And it was developed for fighter jets or fighter planes. And you can get a glass pot that you can put on the stove. That's Pyrex. So it's really tough stuff. So then we jam the tube into there, and it seals. Then we lay down this cushion, you see here, and then we put in the next tube. And he uses them for the skylights, which even if it's 95% waterproof, the 5% that's not is going to cause a lot of leaks. So it's been a headache. They've just gone in there with silicone and fixed it now recently. This is looking up at one of these skylights. So that's the 1930s. 1950, he does the research tower. Now, this building is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, maybe around 13 stories tall. Each of these is 2 stories. We'll see in a minute. And so it suggests a possible approach for the skyscraper, and the world did not go in that direction. 1953, we get the Lever building, and that's the standard skyscraper with steel frame, a central core. So Wright has a central core, but it's structural. So here is our plan. Here's major space, minor space, and then this gets added. So here's our core, and the core, and I can't get a good image of it, so this is blown up. So the core, imagine you've got a pole and you put dishes on it, discs, like a dish. And so those dishes are cantilevering out, not linearly, but all around, boing, 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 from the core. So that's the structure. So all of this is poured-in-place concrete structural. It's going to be obviously quite strong. It's huge, and all this hollowness helps in radius of gyration. And in these holes go elevators, fire stairs, dumbwaiters, mechanical closets, air vents, etc. And then the floors cantilever out. So here's our hollow mechanical and structural core. Here we are cantilevering out. This core is rooted into the ground like a taproot. So again, he uses that term, this organic analogy. So it's like the main root of a tree. And if we look carefully, we'll see that this guy is a little bit smaller than this one. So what's happening is this is square, this is round, and the glass goes by and misses this guy. So here's this mechanical core in his working drawing. Here's our floor coming out, and it tapers because it's cantilevered. There's a hollow in here. That's where our air conditioning is. It's going to be vents here, grills. And now, this is what I meant by the alternating square and round floors. So in effect, if we're in here, this is like a mezzanine. For the here, he's standing under here, you see, there's nothing supporting this thing. There's a whole building over me here. There's all the supports in the center. So here you see it again, and here is, you're down here at your laboratory desk, and then there's somebody up there. Hey, Fred, toss me a test tube. Around 1926, Buckminster Fuller proposed prefabricated apartment buildings that would be delivered by dirigible and lowered into a foundation with these central core and these cantilevered floors coming out. So it's sort of reminiscent of that. I don't know if Wright knew about that. So here's our theme. Here's Unity Temple. Here's Johnson Wax. Main space, secondary space, secondary space. Entrance in between, entrance in between. Balcony running around, skylights in the middle, and these hollows carrying air, these hollows here with air and elevators. So you see him having developed this vocabulary, which he's going to use again and again. Here's the furniture, and it's modular. So you start with this sort of ladder here, 2 ladders supporting a desk. Then you say, okay, I want a waste paper basket. That just got hooks that hangs it on to the top 2, which we can't see here. You say, I want drawers. Those hook on. And the drawers, interestingly, swing open. They don't pull out. And when you visit there, they say, here's a desk you can play with. Please don't open the drawers in the employees' desks. And then you can add on these other surfaces. So typewriting is supposed to happen at a certain level, that's here, and then you work writing at another level, and then up here is for your modems and stuff like that. This, of course, predates that, but we think of how modular our stuff is with your laptop, your desktop, your, hard disks, your files, whatever you've got, and having all these surfaces to work with is really convenient. I was looking for something like this when I redid my study. There's nothing like it, even today. Originally, the chairs had 3 legs, and they kept keeling over, so the originals are in museums. When you go there today, they have 4 legs. So you can see a crack here. This is going to swing out. Not sure if I think it swings this way. And here you see these have been snapped onto this ladder here. Here they are swinging out. Here's some other versions. And then here's using this system for a filing cabinet, same ladders, and then different stuff built onto them. Here's the chair with 4 legs. Now, Herbert Fisk Johnson was the CEO of the company, commissioned Wright, and nearby, he had Wright do a house for him. It's called Wing Spread, and it's sort of in a pinwheel effect, so we have a central living room, dining room core, and then one arm is the parking garages and storage for the lawn equipment. One arm is children's bedrooms, one arm is servants, and one arm is master bedroom. So it's like his earlier prairie-style houses, greatly expanded. So here's our one of the prairie-style houses, the chimney core, and then the 4 arms coming out. They've been extended. And then there's a little ladder here. The kids can go up here and see Daddy come home in a helicopter. Daddy, Daddy! And here's the master bedroom with this huge cantilever. So Wright had no qualms of hiding monster pieces of steel in here to make this cantilever. Kahn would want you to know the steel was there, or do it in concrete and let you see it. Here we still have the theme of the wall disappearing. It's all French doors. Okay, let's do Florida Southern College. It's very brief, and then we'll take a break. So, Lakeland, Florida, he does a college, whole campus, and the observation is made that when getting something this big, architects look to Hadrian's Villa. And I'm not that familiar enough with Hadrian's Villa to exactly see the parallels, but that's the idea. This is a dome made out, it looks like a dome, but it's a fountain, a dome fountain. And it's a master plan and a series of buildings on the campus. Well, I've just been informed that AT&T has renewed my $9.95 a month Navigator software. That's what that ding ding was. This is the main chapel or auditorium. So here's the only area view I could find, picture postcard. Here's the chapel, here's the main auditorium. And then it's got covered walkways because of the Florida sun. A lot of the construction work was done by the students. And here Wright shows you can do something like, this is like really cheap, it's just plywood formwork. You put some patterns in it, you stick this copper edging on it, pour the concrete. And you probably reuse the formwork as you go. But it can look, very rich. There are names on here. This must be alumni who donated money. Ann Pfeiffer Chapel. And again, here are our hollow tubes dropping mechanical, or holding the air carrying ducts. And then this great light suck in the middle bounces the light around and brings it in. So Wright had this compound in Wisconsin, Taliesin, we can now say East, because we're about to talk about Taliesin West. And it's a really beautiful place, rolling green hills, dairy country, rich grass, but a lot of snow in the winter. And Wright was doing a project in Scottsdale and saw the climate and said, this is where I ought to be in the winter. As you saw in the video, he had pneumonia. Doctor wanted him there. It was before antibiotics. So he builds what's initially a campsite, and it continues to fill in and become more developed over the years. And he would, with his family and apprentices, go back and forth, spending winters in Arizona and summers in Spring Green, Wisconsin. So it's a complex compound that continued to develop over the years. It's got his bedroom, living room here, drafting room here. This is a triangle outside with the water. And then we come to garage here with the equipment for, well, they're always doing construction because they're building the place. And then there's a whole bunch more buildings built over the years. Interestingly, there's the Frank Lloyd Wright Architecture School. It's really tiny. It only has like a dozen or so students. And I've lectured there a couple times. Each student, when they get there, builds their own room, which is their bedroom and workshop. And they've got plenty of desert land to do this, and they're on their own to go find support, like find a local concrete contractor who pour a slab for them for free or something like that. They have to go out, and so they learn to be entrepreneurial as well as to be architectural. Huge redwood frames. Originally, this is canvas. Now it's heavyweight canvas. Allows the sun to come through. Concrete with huge boulders, well, not boulders, but very large rocks in it. Here's a motto from Lao Tzu: the truth of the building is not the walls, but the space within, something like that. Lao Tzu is referring to a vessel. And they went around the area and collected rocks with petroglyphs on them, rock graphics, done by ancient inhabitants of the area. They would probably not allowed to do that anymore, but nobody cared in the 30s. They'd bring them there, and Wright had instructed his people, when you find one of these things, determine its north-south orientation, and then when we bring it to Taliesin, we'll put it in the same orientation. And somebody said, well, why are we doing that? He says, so that when the white man is gone and the red man has returned, there will be evidence that there have been intelligent life here. One of the things he worked on during these years was Broadacre City. So this is his version of Le Corbusier's Ville Radieuse, sort of the ideal city. What's the first thing we notice here? It's not very city, right? Looks like an ideal farmland with some suburban development. And so Wright was not a fan of urban living, and his ideal city is sort of a suburb, and he projects into the future with these fantasy flying saucer helicopters and these weird manifestations of future automobiles. Now, around this time, he gets a challenge to do economical housing. So, modern architecture is very much a response to the modern industrial era. What is the main thing that the modern industrial era brings us? Correct. Cheap, mass-produced goods that everybody can afford. So Henry Ford introduces the Model T at $800, and 5 years later it's $400. And the ordinary person could afford it. And so industrial production vastly multiplies the power of the worker to make sufficient amount of stuff that the stuff can be affordable for the ordinary person. So here's Henry Ford churning out these Model Ts, and we're still making buildings the same way the Egyptians did. So a lot of modern architecture gets into how can we make, how many people know what I'm going to say, affordable housing, if that isn't a word you've heard before. So, lots of approaches, and including Le Corbusier, who never does, but imagines how he might make prefabricated housing units that stack up. The closest he gets is unité d'habitation, which is not prefabricated, but based on designs for that. Wright's approach to that is what he calls the Usonian house. And Usonia is his name for America. So he observes that we don't have a name. He said, well, we're the United States. Well, there's the United States of Mexico. Well, we're America. Well, Venezuela's in America. So he makes up a name for us, Usonia, which is a play on utopia, and develops Usonian houses, of which he designs a bunch, and a lot of them get built. And then later in his career in the 50s, he does another version of this called the Usonian automatic. And in that case, you buy the plans and you buy the concrete blocks from the factory of one of his students, and you build it yourself. So it's automatic because it built itself, which meant you built it. But these houses are basically, he takes his prairie-style house and greatly simplifies it to make it cheaper. So famously, the first one is the First Jacobs House near Madison, Wisconsin, and it was done for $5,500, supposedly. Now we don't exactly know what that means. Does that include the cost of the land? Does that include? But anyway, the idea was to be economical. Now, to be economical, step one is no footings. So in the Northeast, we want footings. We dig a trench, which is the shape of our outer wall. You want to go down about 3 feet. You then pour concrete there. You then build up with concrete block till you get maybe a foot above grade, 2 feet above grade, and then you put down your flooring. So now you're firmly anchored. You're below the frost line, so freezing's not going to get under there and heave your house, and you're lifted off the ground. Wright doesn't want to do that. He's attached to the ground. So first thing he does is he levels the ground and he puts down coarse crushed rock. Then he puts down finer crushed rock. Then he puts down these spacers. And then he snakes copper piping. And that's going to carry hot water for radiant slab heating. So then he pours, so here we are, he pours concrete into this. So now our copper tubing is embedded in the concrete. He scores, makes marks on the concrete in the grid of the house. This one happens to be hexagonal grid. And then that marks where our walls can go up. So, slab on grade. He contends that his gravel will protect him from the moving earth, from frost. It's probably not the best way to go. He gets cracked slabs. Also, what would you really worry about here? I'm building this house for you. I'm doing it this way. You're the client. You start to worry. What are you worrying about? What if one of these things leaks? It's in the slab. Got to go into my living room with air hammers? to dig it up and find out where the goddamn leak is. So anyway, it's got problems. But it's a very attractive idea because you pour the slab, you then put down carpeting, you're done. Very economical. You don't have to put down wood floors. You don't have to have purlings to lift the wood above the slab. You're right on slab. Children play on the floor is warm. Wright says if your feet are warm, the rest of you is warm. And heat rises. So the heat's going to come off the floor and heat the room. So in First Jacob's house, that's what he does. And then you see, one of the key things he does to achieve this economy is this is all glass. This is all brick. The most expensive thing you can do in a brick wall is put a window in it. In other words, if you're just laying brick, it just goes right up, very economical. As soon as you have a window, you have to stop, put formwork in there, lay the brick around the formwork, take the formwork out, put the framing into the brick. That's where the major cost of a masonry wall goes. It doesn't have any holes in the wall. It doesn't have any windows in the wall. It's just floor-to-ceiling brick and then floor-to-ceiling glass. Here's a slab, flat roof. Very economical. Also dangerous stuff. Just the way that slab can have problems, a flat roof can have problems. Today we can more likely get away with it. We saw the welded plastic roofing membrane that they put on falling water. And I described how they did that also on Kahn's Exeter Library. And you can pretty much rely on that stuff. Water's not going to get through that. But they would do 5-ply tar paper. You lay down felt, you lay down hot tar, you lay down felt, and this stuff is good for theoretically 20 years. Then you got to rip it all up and replace it. So your roof's going to be vulnerable to leaks also. Now the Jacobs outgrew this house, and so they did second Jacob's house. That's why it's called First Jacob's house. Here, he does a passive solar house in 1943. So this is south. So our south sun is low in the winter. The light comes in, hits the floor, heats up the slab, retains the heat into the night. Summer, the sun is high, and this overhang keeps the sun from getting inside. The back is north, and the earth is burned up. So you have this thick masonry wall plus the earth, keeping you warm in the back. So, passive solar house. What's the difference between passive solar and active solar? How does active solar work? What's an example of active? If you're using active solar in your house, what are you doing? That would be one example, and a little bit less high-tech. How many people had this in your mechanical course? Passive solar and active solar. How many people had it and just don't remember? How many people did not cover it? Everybody's got to raise your hand one way or the other. How many people was not covered in your mechanical courses? How many people was covered, you just don't remember? Fine. So, active solar, passive solar is this. You don't do anything. It's just this, you take advantage of the fact the sun is lower in winter and higher in summer and stuff like that. Active solar You might have a box on the roof with a glass surface. Inside the box is a black hose curled back and forth. That box with glass on it is going to heat up from the greenhouse effect. Sun comes through the glass, gets in there, becomes infrared. Infrared can't get through the glass, it can't get out. That's why a greenhouse, that's why your car is so hot. When you get back to it, you parked it in the sun in the summer. So you've got basically like an automobile with curled tubing in there, which might just be rubber hose, and it's probably black to help it. Now, all the water in that tubing is going to get real hot, just like it's hot in your car. That tubing then goes through a pump, is pulled to your radiator system, goes through your baseboard heaters, got heated up on the roof. That's active solar. Passive solar, you don't do anything. No moving parts. Active solar, yes, it might include photovoltaics, but most simply it's you capture the heat probably in a solar box like I just described, like in your car, and you then simply pipe that heat in water to your baseboard. Now it gets even more complicated because what do you do at night? So what you need to do is you run that water into a big tank in the basement that's well insulated to hold on to it, or you use that water to heat salts, which retain the heat better than water, and then you pull the heat from the salts to run through your baseboard. And it's so complicated and there's so many chances for leaks, people pretty much don't do it. But since the 60s, people say, oh, this is the way to do it. Total, you know, look, we don't need fossil fuels to heat our homes. You just use solar, active solar. So why do we need fossil fuels? We've got thermal, solar, and wind. Only problem is they don't work. It's been 50 years now and nobody's doing it. And the reason is it doesn't work. Wind works, but for enough energy, for enough windmills, for all of England's electricity, you would have to cover all of France with windmills. That's what today's very high-tech windmills. For solar, electric, solar, photovoltaic, very good, getting cheaper all the time, but it's got to be supplemental. In other words, what do you do at night? What do you do when the sun doesn't shine? So then you got to pull electricity off the grid. But that's starting to work. Panels on the roof are starting to make sense. But these active heating systems, they're well worked out. They've been doing them since the 60s, but they can really generate headaches. So here is Second Jacob's house, and what it would look like if you straightened it out. I showed you this before when we looked at the patterns. Here is David Wright house, one of his sons, and the Lloyd Lewis house, grandson, and they're the same. One is just curved. I mean, even, you know, this element is here, this element is here. So he likes playing with these patterns. There's a whole community of these in upstate New York, these Usonian houses. In 1941, there's a major exhibit of Frank Lloyd Wright Museum of Modern Art, and they built a Usonian house in the garden of the Museum of Modern Art. Now, when we typically make our residential walls stud wall construction, right? 2x4s, sheetrock on either side. It's an exterior wall, 2x4 sheetrock inside, insulation in the wall, outside is sheathing, and then the outside finishing surface. Wright doesn't like that. That's, you know, first of all, the sheetrock is trying to look like plaster. It's not. And so he makes a board and batten wall that's solid wood. And here's the detailing. Or 2 surfaces of wood. Here are some of these Usonian houses. They're basically 4 types. There's linear, there's hexagonal, there's polywog with like a big head and a tail, and there's L-shaped. He never makes a garage. He always makes carports, which is just an overhanging roof but no walls. Doesn't like garages. Here's some more of the basic types of the Usonian houses. Now, this house follows the principles of the Usonian houses, but it's a very expensive, luxurious house. And that's the Hanna House in Palo Alto, California, 1937. So I've been teaching this material for some time, so I'm familiar with the house. Matter of fact, there was a House and Garden magazine on the house, whole issue, that I had when I was a student. My mother saved it for me. Somebody stole it at school. And then there was a book about 20 years ago, because the house has been changing over the years. And I'm in Palo Alto regularly for conferences. So the last time I was there, I actually had a day, you know, to skip the morning conference. So I got to find out if I can go there. So I get online, I look it up, I get this recording. You have to make your reservations for the tour 3 months in advance. So, okay, I didn't make it this time. So this was a Stanford professor. It's right near the campus. And you don't notice it right away when you look at it, but it's on a hexagonal grid, a trihex grid. And so when we look close, we see, you see these little saw teeth here? You can just see them up here. It's because the brick is coming together. If the brick comes together at a right angle, you get a clean corner. But if it's coming together at 120 degrees, you're going to get the bricks bumping out. Now, you could get custom bricks to avoid that, but he chooses not to do that. So here's the plan. And we can barely see the trihex grid in here. So this is the dining area, and we flow around. And this is the children's playroom down here. Now, one of the nifty things about this, certain of these walls are fixed because they're bearing. The rest, it can be changed around. So when the kids grew up, they greatly expanded their bedroom, added, you know, a library and sitting room for themselves, and then there was grandchildren sleepover rooms. So the house sort of organically evolved. It's also called the honeycomb house because the bees use this trihex grid. And there's a guest house here. So you come in here, there's a courtyard for parking, and then we come in here and there's the house. So here's that grid. Dining room table is on the trihex. It's built in. And here, for the children's play area, we see their toys here. This wall is going in and out on this hexagon. So, and it's glass. It's got mullions, but it's glass. So it's like we've got this hexagonal glass towers, almost like giant quartz crystals. And we've got our heated slab for the kids to play on and then rub. Here's the grid, it's been inscribed, and then we just build our walls. And you can just see them out at the site. No, let's bump the wall out over here. You know, as long as you catch it before it's built, you can just sort of make alterations as you go. Here again, we see this sort of flowing quality. And here you see, and right away, you wouldn't immediately say, there are no right angles. You wouldn't necessarily notice that. But when we see here, it becomes really obvious. This is a 120 and not a 90, and that's why the bricks are showing these bumps. Wright was not big on kitchens, so the kitchen's rather tight. Now, we're in Palo Alto, California. Weather's pretty nice there, but it can get hot in the summer, and this is before air conditioning. So today you just have air conditioning. But he makes this double, the ceiling and then roof. So here's our space. It's high up, so we get a chimney effect. Air rises, goes through here, and vents out. Sun's beating down here, and that's in effect pulling the air up. This heating effect up here helps vent the air. So it's sort of like a passive ventilating system with a double ceiling to protect you against the intensity of the sun. And again, he doesn't want to use stud wall construction. So we have these double board and batten. So this is board and then this is batten to provide a joint, pick it up again, and then a joint to get it to the floor and to the ceiling. Now in plan, he starts with what happens at the corners. He starts with this figure, and this then becomes the joint for when we break off and do our 120. And here we're doing a 60. Now, this one joint with sometimes peeling off an edge will handle every situation. Now, who cares? You know, if you go to the mill and say, I want 6 different milled wood thingies here to make, you know, to be vertical, to make joint into. Or I want one. I want 100 of one. I want 60 of one, or 20 each of these, or 10 each of these 6 different ones. The mill's not going to charge you any different. You're not going to save any money. Yeah, you just have to adjust the blade on there before you run the next piece of wood through the mill. But these architects do this. It's like Corbu uses the same size block on each of his different houses because that's modular and industrial. Like, it matters. But it's just thinking industrially of mass production. So these things are all based on one module. Why do we no longer think that way today? There's an alternative to mass production, which is mass customization, right? So you make a bazillion of them, every one different, for the same cost of making a bazillion of them, every one the same. In other words, our production capabilities have evolved into giving us, so let's say it's going through some bzz, bzz thing, the computer can reset the thing for each one, you know, and it still goes just as fast. Now maybe making them all identical is going to save a little bit. But you get something like a boombox radio. Try to find another one like it. 3 weeks later, they don't make that one anymore. You know, Logitech makes great stuff. You know, like computer mice. And so I like Logitech speakers for iPads, iPods. So I get a speaker I really like. 2 months later, I better get another one of those. They don't have it anymore. Logitech doesn't keep anything for more than a couple months, and then they change it. It's part of their business plan. Contrast that with that portable black Singer sewing machine that comes in a little black box. They made that identically for 80 years. So this shows how it changed, they changed it. I'm not going to go into the details here. But when the kids grew up and went away, they vastly expanded the master bedroom.